When I was a kid, I was completely obsessed with Famous Monsters of Filmland. I went through every issue I could get my grubby little hands on, but my favorite was issue number 274, and I could probably recite that thing cover to cover if you handed it to me right now. Somewhere in the back pages of that issue was an ad for the Warner Archive collection, and that ad is the reason I'm making this very video. The ad featured this strange half-ape, half-man hybrid standing in the middle of a playground while kids played around it, completely unaware. And the thing just stared straight into the camera. I was maybe 10 years old, and it wrecked me. It looked like one of those old Slender Man photos that people were passing around on the Something Awful forums back in the day. On top of that too, the Travis the Chimp attack was still fresh news at the time, so a half-human ape creature standing near a playground full of kids hit a very specific nerve for me. The ad was basically pushing a handful of obscure Warner B movies available on physical media. Stuff like the very awful tree monster movie From Hell It Came. But the image that was doing all the heavy lifting, the one they put front and center, was for a 1970 film called Trog. I begged my mom to put a hold on it at the library. I needed to see this thing.
Whatever the risk, this kill-crazy fiend from hell must be destroyed.
When it finally came in and I sat down to watch it, I was bored out of my mind. It was cheesy in a way that one creepy promotional still never really prepared me for. And the movie I'd been building up in my head for weeks turned out to be nothing like the movie that I actually got. But it took me some years to come back around on it. I have, and now I genuinely love this movie because of what it took to get it on screen. Production of Trog was an absolute shit show from the day it was first announced to the day it wrapped. So first, let's talk about what the movie is actually about. A group of amateur spelunkers stumble onto a fissure in a hillside and find a prehistoric surviving troglodyte living inside, a discovery the local businessman Sam Murdoch objects to almost immediately. Dr. Emily Brockton, a research scientist, takes custody of the creature and starts trying to civilize him, teaching him to play with toys, exposing him to classical music, even wrapping her own pink scarf around his neck. But Murdoch isn't convinced any of it is safe, and one night he breaks into the research center, smashes the lab equipment, and frees the creature himself to prove his point. Trog kills him almost immediately. From there, he tears through the nearby village, killing a greengrocer, flipping a car, and setting it on fire, and then murdering a butcher in a scene that was graphic enough that British censors fought to have it cut. Trog then grabs a young girl from a playground, which is the exact image that ad printed in my head years earlier, and Dr. Brockton tracks him down to his cave and manages to talk him into letting the girl go. But the military doesn't wait around for a peaceful ending. They shoot him, he dies, end of movie. For a story that ends in such a gruesome manner, Trog genuinely wants credit for wrestling with big ideas. Evolution, the fuzzy line between human and animal, that kind of thing. What it actually got was a shoestring British horror production built entirely around ringing box office out of a fading Hollywood name.
Trog!
A formula that was pretty common at the time. The old studio system used to protect actresses like Joan Crawford, manage their image, and control exactly how the public watched them age on screen, but by this time, that was dead. Exploitation producers figured out pretty quickly that there was still money sitting in those names. Trog is about as pure a version of that strategy that the genre ever produced. Freddie Francis directed the film, and he came up as a cinematographer before he ever sat in a director's chair. Herman Cohen produced it, and his entire career ran on squeezing real profit out of horror pictures shot for almost nothing. So when you put those two people together, you get Trog. The film started life in 1968 under the working titles The Missing Link and Trog, the Million-Year-Old Man. based on a story by Peter Bryan and John Gilling, with a male anthropologist in the lead. Tony Tenzer developed it first at Tygon Films before selling the whole package to Cohen, who lined up a co-production deal with Warner Brothers and Seven Arts. It was supposed to have a $2.5 million budget and start filming in November, but it didn't happen. Financial and logistical problems pushed the shoot back to more than half a year, and the whole project sat stalled until Joan Crawford signed on in May 1969 for a flat fee of $70,000. Her casting forced Cohen and screenwriter Aben Candle to throw out the male lead and rebuild the part from scratch as Dr. Emily Brockton, shaped entirely around Crawford's persona. Filming finally started June 30th, 1969 at Bray Studios, and on location across Berkshire and Buckinghamshire, and it wrapped on schedule September 8th. Post-production ran through February 1970, and Cohen screened the finished cut for Warner Brothers executives that July. The film opened in limited release on September 23, 1970 in New York and Los Angeles, before going wide a week later on a double bill with Hammer's Taste the Blood of Dracula.
Dracula's blood.
I think the most interesting part of this entire movie is Joan Crawford, which sounds crazy because there's a literal caveman, half-ape thing running around blowing up cars, but trust me here, her story is kind of nuts. She had to deal with a rewritten script, a rushed production schedule, and she also had to play every scene across from Joe Cornelius, a professional wrestler who fought under the name Dazzler. He had retired undefeated in 1967. Cohen hired him because he wanted physical presence and stunt work. He didn't really care about acting range, and so Cornelius delivered exactly that. His entire costume for Trog came down to a rubber mask, a loincloth, and some fake fur booties. A rumor followed the film for decades, claiming that the mask was recycled straight off the Dawn of Man sequence from Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey. And it's an easy rumor to believe once you see how similar these two designs look. Hell, I believed this myself for a very long time. But film historian David Del Valle eventually set the record straight. 2 brand new masks were sculpted specifically for Trog. The resemblance comes down to the man who built them. Makeup artist Charles E. Parker had worked under Kubrick on 2001 and carried the same techniques, materials, and facial templates over to this production. So no, Trog does not reuse any masks from 2001. They just got the guy that made those masks from 2001 and had him basically do the exact same thing for their production. And I'm not gonna lie, the mask looks really good. It's uncanny at points. It's just a shame that the rest of Cornelius's body didn't get the same treatment, because there's a really good latex mask and then a bare, visibly human torso underneath. It's so bizarre looking, it borders on being comedic. This gap in craftsmanship shows up again in one of the film's stranger sequences, where Dr. Brockton hooks Trog up to an experimental brainwave visualizer, meant to project his prehistoric memories onto a monitor. The film had an opportunity to show off some really original and interesting dinosaur sequences, but instead, they just used stock footage. It was about 4 minutes of tinted material from The Animal World, a 1956 Warner Brothers nature documentary that used stop-motion effects from Willis O'Brien and Ray Harryhausen. So technically, you do get some really neat stop-motion effects in here. It just so happens that they were reused from a rather obscure documentary. I guess if you're not familiar with The Animal World, it isn't all that noticeable, and if anything, it's kind of a plus. But if you're someone like me who knows Harryhausen's filmography like the back of your hand, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. All of these budget limitations, though, were very obvious to Joan Crawford, and the production made sure that she felt every bit of the money that wasn't there. When she landed in England to start filming, there wasn't a driver waiting for her. Instead, it was a worn-out Volkswagen camper van that was standing in as her dressing room. Budget constraints forced her to share a single makeup table with Joe Cornelius, while he sat there in full Trog prosthetics. It was a production that could not be bothered to spend real money on a woman who had already won an Academy Award. She was Hollywood royalty. Crawford refused to wear the wardrobe that the production had offered her and brought her own. showing up on screen in sharp-tailored pantsuits and her signature pink scarf. Michael Gough played Sam Murdoch with his usual theatrical intensity, while Bernard Kay played the skeptical Inspector Greenham.
You may want to hide, you may want to forget what you see, but you can't. You can't escape.
Crawford's drinking was an open secret in the industry by 1969, and people on the production described her as tired and glassy-eyed for most of the shoot. Her line readings have been called flat and mechanical, closer to someone who's reciting a script in a language they don't fully understand, as opposed to an Academy Award-winning actress working through a role. Part of that came from her dependence on cue cards that were scattered around the set. Freddie Francis found them maddening because they boxed in his camera movement and flattened the visual style he wanted, and he later said the shoot moved so fast that the crew even picked up the sound of a prop man shuffling the cards on the finished soundtrack. A candid interview from July 30th, 1969, photographed by Michael Ward for the Times of London, caught the physical toll directly, showing deep lines in her face that led one observer to describe her as a very sad old lady. Herman Cohen later said that Crawford arrived in England with 4 cases of 100 proof vodka and kept a large frosted Pepsi cup on set filled with vodka, not soda, and that he had to keep reminding her of their agreement that she wouldn't drink before noon. Other people who were there actually tell a bit of a different story though. Joe Cornelius, interviewed by John Waters in 2015 for the British Film Institute, said he never once saw a cue card on set, and remembered Crawford as punctual, easy to work with, and generous towards the crew. Kim Braden backed this up, describing an actress who treated even the most ridiculous scenes with total seriousness. Crawford rolled a ball back and forth with Cornelius and calmed his rages by shouting his name at him, and she did all of it with the same conviction she'd bring to a real drama. Waters has argued that this exact commitment poured into material this absurd is what makes Trog such a camp classic. I think both pictures of Crawford are true at the same time. Yes, she was a performer who was visibly worn down by illness and addiction, but she can still show up on time, hit her marks, and give a scene about feeding a grown man rubber lizards everything she's got. Critics tore the film apart when it opened, but it made its money back and was #1 at the box office. It pulled in $96,000 across 24 theaters in New York and LA in its opening week alone. The film spent some time lingering at grindhouse cinemas or drive-in theaters, but what I think is the most interesting part is what happened to the film's reputation after that fact. John Landis built his entire 1973 directorial debut, Schlock, as a direct parody of it, taking the same premise of a prehistoric ape-man loose in the suburbs and playing it for laughs, which locked Trog in as a foundational piece of trash cinema history. I think about that Warner Archive ad every time I rewatch this movie now. 11-year-old me saw one still of a half-ape creature standing in a playground and built an entire horror movie in his head, and the actual film could have never lived up to that. What I didn't know back then was that the real horror story was happening off-camera the whole time. Knowing all of that is why I love the movie now. Trog is not a great movie or a masterpiece by any conventional measure, but if you love Schlock, you love B-movies, and you love monster movies, this might just be for you. And with all that out of the way, I'm Cole McCormick. You're watching Firewood Media. If you liked what I had to say here, consider subscribing or becoming a channel member. It's only $1.99 a month, and you'll get early access to select videos, especially my Universal Monster Retrospective series, which will be out to the public in October, but should be available to channel members very shortly. Either way, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.